Hello, everybody. It's PJ Nisbet here from Value Selling. Very pleased that you've been able to join us on this complimentary value selling webinar about power prospecting. We have a very international audience. We have people from America, obviously, New York and California, from London, Cape Town, Nairobi, Dubai, Dublin. So really cosmopolitan international group. So thank you for that. During the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking to you about how to effectively prospect, giving you tips and tactics, and helping you develop a strategy to create enough qualified leads to fill your sales funnels. For those of you who cannot stay with us until the end, or if you have colleagues who are joining a bit later, you will note that the webinar is being recorded. So this will be up on the Value Selling website within the next half a day, or 4 or 5 hours after this. We upload a slide share and a recording, so it will be available during the day if you're in America. And also, please, if you have any questions during this session, please use the Q&A window on your screens. I have allowed some time at the end to answer these, and if I don't make it to all of them at the end of the session, then I will come back to you directly. So let's jump into the first slide, which is a poll. And I'd like you to think about this before. Don't answer the Q&A. I'm going to put up another slide, a question really, just to give some context to today's webinar. What do you think the greatest sales challenge you have today is? You can choose more than one, but it would be really nice to get a sense of what you're seeing your challenges are. So please now, can you vote on these half a dozen, 7 different challenges. These come from a recent research that was done by CSO Insights last year, 2016, where they asked a large number of big blue chip sales organizations what their salespeople thought the biggest challenges were, and I'll share that with you in a moment. So hopefully everybody has had a chance to pick one or two. Let's see what the results look like. So, inability to generate enough qualified leads is not surprisingly number one, 52%. And actually that percentage is very close to the figures that CSO Insights came up with. I think they were at 51% actually. So you're very, very close to the research. They also rated the engaging with key decision makers highly, in the 40s. Interestingly, the difficult to differentiate in the research was at 41%. Sales cycles too long, which is your number 3, was at 28%, so a little bit higher than what we rated. So really interesting, and thank you for that, because it kind of ties in with exactly what we're going to be talking about today. That the most difficult thing for most of us, many of us, is our ability to generate enough qualified leads. It's not too surprising that this is the most difficult, the thing that people find the most difficult, because as I think we all probably are aware, the world of selling has changed quite dramatically in the last 10 years. If you think about the fact that we now live in this world, this information age, where the prospects are much better educated, and that means that very often they're coming into the sales cycle later and later. You can debate whether, if it's actually the physical person coming in later and later, but you could debate that actually the sales interaction could be starting earlier from a social, and we'll talk a little bit about social selling. But the interactions perhaps are happening earlier in the buying process, but there seems to be no doubt that the physical sales interaction, the telephone or face-to-face meeting, is happening later in the sales cycle. Definitely more and more people involved in the decision. So again, we all know that organizations now are moving to flatter organizational structures, more consensus decision making, essentially in value selling terms, more people who can say no. So that's the recent statistics from CEB were that there are 5.2 signatories in a complex B2B sales. It's probably more for many of us. I was at a client recently and they had 24 signatories required on a proposal in the public sector. So this is a new part of selling, is that we have a much more in the way of people who have to be involved from a technical or a veto point of view. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that there's definitely limited access to buyers, and we're going to talk about that today. I think it's something of a paradox in the information age where we have 24/7 communication ability. It's actually harder and harder to talk to people. There are very few people that I know who are sitting around waiting for a salesperson to call them. And it's hard to get FaceTime or even telephone time with people. It's I think one of the biggest challenges that we face as salespeople. So the world has changed dramatically, certainly in the last 10 years. Probably the sales world has changed more in the last 10 years than it did in the 50 years before that. And we have to adapt our selling techniques and our prospecting techniques to this new world. So what I'm going to cover off with you in this short webinar are these topics. It's not, as we like to say in value selling terms, it's not rocket science. It's simple. But what we're trying to do is I'm going to give you some ideas about how to develop a strategy and tactics for filling your pipeline. Step one, I will talk about profiling your ideal customers, being really crystal clear about that. I want to give you some ideas on creating a campaign to engage with the prospects, talk about the activities necessary to achieve your quota or your target. Sales performance is connected to two aspects, really. One is the activity level, so how much of this activity do I do? And then the second part of it is how effective am I? What is the quality of those interactions? But I think it's very important to start with the activity, the activity that you need to achieve your quotas. I want to talk more about the telephone. So how do we get meetings? Give you some ideas on prospecting using the telephone, using a multi-dimensional approach. Specifically, handling gatekeepers, handling brush-offs and objections. What are some tips and tactics around that? And then I'm going to share with you some interesting statistics. There's some fascinating statistics that we have now around prospecting and about how difficult that is or how easy it is. And then finally, I'm going to give you some ideas for future action. As I often say, a lot of this is common sense, but not common practice. If we're going to achieve our sales targets, we really need to be prepared to put in the hard yards, and we have to have a clear strategy on how to execute. Otherwise, it's probably not going to happen for us. Step one is to really think about your ideal customer. As the late, great Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. We need to be crystal clear about what is that ideal client that we have in mind. I see many companies that I deal with who take a kind of shotgun approach to prospecting. What I'm suggesting to you is that that you don't do that. But rather be really circumspect and very careful about analyzing the type of customer that you're going for. So think about the geography, obviously. Where are these customers based? Think about the size, the ideal size of business that you're targeting. In certain sectors, you may want to think about the demographics, so the age profile, the income profile, are they male, are they female? So think about that. Might be relevant in some areas. Think about the company maturity. Are you going for startup companies, new companies, or are they more mature? The industry obviously is important. Industry sector. Many of you on the line would have done work on this and have various market sectors. And think about their business situation. Are they growing? Are they flat? Are they in decline? And let me give you an example of that. I think if you have a client who sells stored data in the cloud, just a simple example. I think you imagine that they have the software to store pretty well unlimited data in the cloud. They have very good security functionality, encryption functionality. If they were doing this exercise, they would think very clearly about what geographies would their clients be in. They would be thinking about clients with a lot of data. They might be thinking about clients with sensitive data, so they're in an industry where perhaps compliance is very important. They might be thinking about or targeting clients with old infrastructure, and really trying to figure out what it is that they're looking for. Quite a nice exercise as well is to think about the reverse of it. So as well as profiling your ideal customer, and that might include other things like they have they're open to change, they're financially strong, but then think about the other side of the coin. What does the customer from hell look like? And paint that picture on a flip chart. So what's the worst customer you could imagine? And if you do the worst customer you could imagine, and then you do the best customer, and then try and pick your ideal customer in between, and just be really clear on what it is that you're looking for. Once you've analyzed, if you like, the market and the demographics and the kind of customer, then think about the buying roles. Think about specifically which are the people, the buying roles that you need to contact. In my cloud example, it might be the data center manager or the IT manager. Who are all the various buying roles that would be interested or would have the kind of business issues and problems that we think about? In value selling terms, and I think most of you on the webinar have been on the value selling framework, so understand these terms. But after considering the buying roles, you'd want to think about what are the typical priorities, what are their business issues, what are they trying to achieve. Typically, these are related to revenue, cost, quality, or compliance, or some derivative of that. So when I say revenue, it could be growth, could be market share, could be increased margin. Cost and quality could also relate to efficiency, or it could be compliance. But what are the business issues that we as an organization, or think about your own sales organization, what are the business issues that you solve? Then the next step will be to think about the things that you're good at solving, the problems. If that's the business issue, what are the challenges that get in the way of that, and how does your solution solve those challenges? So these would be a combination of people, process, and technology, anything that stops them achieving their priority. I like again, some of you might be familiar with the Simon Sinek talk on TED. They start with why. If you haven't seen that, I would recommend looking at YouTube. It's over 1 million views, well over 1 million views on YouTube, where Simon Sinek basically puts out a philosophy that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And he references Apple and a few other famous brands. in terms of the philosophy behind the business. And I think when we're thinking about the problems that we solve and the priorities that we can help our clients with, it's really important to think about why we do things, or why they do things, and how we can help them achieve that. I think also when you talk about the problems, to try and expand on that, to try and think about perhaps unconsidered problems. So again, those of you who've been on value selling will know that ideally we're looking for 3 to 5 what we call hooks, which we can put hats on in the solution box. But think about enough pain or enough problems that you can solve with your unique or special capabilities. And if you can generate this as a list, and there's this requires some strategy and some thinking to really try and figure out what are we good at solving. And then if you have that and you marry that into your ideal customer, you're going to have a really good idea about what that ideal client looks like. And I must say, sometimes the hard part of this exercise is to decide what not to do rather than what to do. Not most, but a lot of clients that I deal with, as I say, take on this kind of scattergun approach and think, well, actually any business is good business. But I would suggest to you that the more focused and the more clear you are about your target prospects, the greater chance you have of being successful. Once you've done that, so we're crystal clear now about who we're looking for and what their problems are and what their business issues are, then of course we need to identify the sources of information to find these people. Again, this is quite basic, and I'm sure many of you are doing this, but look at industry information, look at trade associations. For myself, selling sales training, which I do for a living, I would join key industries like the Association of Professional Sales, industry bodies in the UK, Inside Sales Professionals, ISP. So you would join key trade associations to meet your colleagues. Also meet, and obviously you would be looking at the trade associations of your ideal customers. Think about partner opportunities and co-marketing opportunities. So if there are other people selling a similar product, not the same product, but there's a synergy there, I think in today's world, this kind of networking and strategy is really critical. I was talking today to a client who's busy developing a strategic alliance with consultants in their industry to get the consultants to recommend their particular product alongside other products in a particular application. So think clearly about, who else is involved with these ideal customers. Could there be some nice synergy and links in that? Obviously, internal data, your marketing campaigns, and we'll talk more about the qualified leads and how do you get them from marketing campaigns. Don't forget about past customers, really, really important. Go through everyone who's bought from you in the past. Where are they now? Have they moved jobs? Who's taken their job that they moved, and where, and what job have they moved to? So normally when someone moves positions, there are 2 or 3 prospecting opportunities that come out of that. And then finally, there's the more typical, external data, the lists and social networking, particularly LinkedIn. I always, and I think it's quite interesting, we kicked off the webinar talking about, how the world of selling has changed and how things are more difficult. But actually, I always say to the classes that I teach that it's one of the best times in history to be a salesperson, because there is so much information available. Although it's challenging because buyers are involved later and later in the sales process, and there's more and more, it's harder and harder to get access, all of those things. It's also, there are wonderful tools, LinkedIn and Google, sales automation tools, predictive analytics. So there's a tremendous amount of help actually that has come to salespeople as part of this change that we never had before. Just a few comments on LinkedIn, and we could probably spend 45 minutes talking about LinkedIn. I'm a great believer, particularly in the Sales Navigator part of LinkedIn. And again, I'm sure many of you on the call are using Sales Navigator. If you're not, I would definitely have a look at it. But just a couple of high-level points. Join and participate in groups. I think that's the sort of basic one. Not only groups, your groups. I think a common mistake people make is they join groups of like-minded people, the same as what they're doing. The important thing is to join the groups of your customers and participate in those and make comments. Keep your profile up to date. And again, there's a huge amount of information on the internet. In fact, LinkedIn themselves have a lot of information about how to structure your profile properly. Not a CV. It's about the problems that you solve. Good quality photographs. All of that sort of information is absolutely critical. LinkedIn is now your electronic way of networking. In the old days, you might have gone to a chamber of commerce or a meeting or a more physical way. Now it's very much about electronic networking. So the ability to have a really compelling LinkedIn profile and to be active on LinkedIn is critical. Ask and answer questions. I think, again, I have a cadence of every day spending at least 30 minutes on social media, going through, looking at groups, asking questions, making comments, liking things, retweeting things. And it's not difficult to do. Just establish the cadence and establish a regular routine where you're going in and getting involved and basically trying to build yourself into something of a thought leader and build your personal brand. Give recommendations and skills endorsement, very important. When you do use, and we'll talk about in-mails versus emails in a moment, but when you are using in-mails, be very specific about who it is that you know, so what your common referral is, the call to action, 120 words, very concise, mention who it is that you know in the first sentence. So again, LinkedIn has a lot of advice on this, and it shouldn't be soliciting or selling on LinkedIn. It should be trying to connect with people and look for referrals and help them to achieve their goals with your product. It's interesting, the sharing information, becoming an expert. Since 2015, I think over 2 million people have published blogs or content on LinkedIn. So this phenomenon has made us all into authors and creators of content, and I think that's a wonderful thing. So becoming a subject matter expert and really focusing on your brand and making contributions is critical to the whole aspect of social selling. If we look at some other ways, and I'll come back to the social selling in a moment, but I think one that's sometimes overlooked is actually leveraging your base. It's 10 times easier, I've read, to sell to current clients than finding completely new ones. The cost of finding new ones is 10 times more than having an existing client and expanding your product range or finding additional problems that you can solve, tapping into additional buying centers if they're big multinational companies. What other parts can we sell to? You've already developed a relationship, a trusting relationship, got your products in. Much easier to do that rather than launching out and doing cold prospecting. Ask for referrals. Interesting statistic, which I'll share with you at the end, is that clients very rarely get asked for referrals, but in fact they're one of the most powerful ways of creating new business. So who in your network, if I think about my world and setting sales training, I ask people that I've worked with and know, who in your network is a sales leader who would like to improve the sales performance of their team. Just ask the question. You'll be amazed at what comes out of that. So think about your network. Think about what it is that you could ask them that would enable you to expand into a warm lead or warm referral. Just looking at the prospecting ratios, as I mentioned earlier, if we understand exactly what their ideal client looks like, we figured out where we can get that information from. Next step is to think about what activities do I need to achieve in order to hit my numbers. Very simple calculation. And again, many of you may have done this, hopefully have done this. If your target was, for example, 2 million whatever, dollars, pounds, euros, whatever your local currency is, figure out what your average transaction size is. So in this example, say it was 125,000 was the average deal size. So you need to, that's the second important number. Therefore, you need, in order to hit the 2 million, you need 16 deals of 125,000 each. So you need 16 deals in the year. The win rate, and most companies are quite good at knowing what this is. So, what's our win rate from meeting to close? Every time we have a face-to-face meeting or presentation or proposal or however it is that you pitch, what's the close rate? Assume in this example it was 1 out of 3, so 1/3 you close. If you get in front of a customer 3 times, you'll close 1. That then means that I have to have meetings. I have to have 16 times 3 meetings. That means I need 48 presentations, pitches, proposals in order to hit that number. The other important ratio is how many qualified leads, perhaps that I get from marketing or that I'm generating through LinkedIn or I'm generating through campaigns, do I then need to get a meeting? So there are 2 ratios. One is my close ratio. One is my lead to meeting ratio. In this example, if it was 1 out of 5, then, and this is a slightly scary bit, then I need to be creating 5 times 48, because that's the number of qualified prospects I need, which in this simple maths would be about 240 a year, 20 a month, or approximately 1 a day. So I need to generate somehow 1 qualified lead a day, and obviously there are variations of how well qualified they are, but as a minimum, 1 qualified lead a day I need to be getting in if I was to want to hit a target of 2 million with an average deal size of 125. So whatever your numbers are, I would really urge you to sit down and figure that out, because that's kind of how you get out of the starting blocks, is to say, well, what do I actually need to do each day in order to achieve my target? And I'm always amazed at how often people haven't done that. They say, well, we want to do more prospecting on our target. And you say, well, okay, well, let's now do the numbers. And this means that, in fact, you actually have to be calling, or you need to have this number of leads coming in the top of the funnel, which you can qualify, and they haven't done the maths. So the maths is important, because that leads you then into your activities. The activities to create leads are many, and I'm just putting a few examples here. We've talked about LinkedIn, email campaigns, still important. A lot of companies still using that. Obviously, the response rate on emails, certainly in my experience, is not as good as LinkedIn. Typically, an email campaign, if you're getting 1 or 2%, that's very good. Your LinkedIn, for me, is more like around 5%, 6% on a good LinkedIn in-mail campaign where you're referencing a referral. You should be getting, in the 5, 6%, so 2 or 3 times better than an email campaign. Social media is important generally, so other kinds of social media like Facebook and Twitter, the general social selling, to give it its broad term. Interesting statistic from the Aberdeen group a few years ago was that 73% of salespeople using social selling as part of their sales process outperformed their sales peers and exceeded quota 23% more often. So there's no doubt that social selling has an impact. For me, the debate a little bit is that and I think the pendulum is swinging back. I think there was a period a few years ago, maybe even a year ago, where people were thinking this is actually the way that we sell, and the telephone was being neglected. We don't have to pick up the phone. In fact, a friend of mine who speaks at quite a lot of inside sales conferences has a joke that he says, if you want to stop salespeople selling put a telephone in front of them, because I think we've had so much hype around social selling and you don't sell and let the buyer find you that the pendulum almost went away to say, well, we're not going to use a telephone. In my opinion, the telephone is absolutely critical sales tool, and that's really what I want to spend this time on, the remaining time that we have left, is talk about how do I really use the telephone to best effect. Of course, we need to work out, following on that calculation of the number of qualified leads that we need to then figure out the number of phone calls we need to make. So I've now got my qualified leads. I then need to figure out how many dials do I have to make, on the basis that, as we all know, people generally don't pick up the phone, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that strategy. But if you, for example, said 5% of the time people will answer the phone, I mean, it depends on your industry, but it's probably somewhere around there, less than 10 anyway. So if I'm making 50 dials in a day, and I'm only getting 5 conversations, that's 2 or 3 conversations. And of those 2 or 3 conversations, I might get 1 or 2 move forwards, whether it's another conversation or whether it's a meeting. So these numbers are absolutely critical to think about them and think about what does that mean in terms of activity rates. If I don't do the dials, if I don't do X number of dials, I think there's a difference between dials and conversations. But if I want to get the conversations, I've got to do the dials. A nice book some of you might know called Go for No by Richard Fenton, Andrea Waltz. I often refer to that in inside sales context. So we understand that a lot of people don't pick up the phone, but that doesn't. So what you do is you just keep phoning. So you have a cadence of dialing, knowing that everyone that you dial, that that they don't answer, actually you're making progress towards your end goal of getting the conversations. So it's a kind of mental shift that you make. I need to do the dials, go for no if you like, in order to get the yeses. And if you can have that kind of psychology to telephoning, which there are not many people in the world who I think really enjoy doing that. There are some, but most people do not enjoy it. But you've got to get into that cadence of saying X number of dials is going to give me this number of yeses or conversations. Think about the research, doing non-sales time. So research and preparation, as we said earlier, is very important. Don't do that during the good phoning time, so what I call power hours. So create times, optimum times when the prospects are going to be around, even though you might only have 10% chance of them picking up the phone. They will be during business hours. I think there's nothing more frustrating than seeing salespeople filling out expense forms at 10 o'clock in the morning, which is an ideal time for telephoning. There's a lot of research on the best times to call, and again, there's some organizations that specialize in this. So Wednesdays and Thursdays between 8 and 9 are very good. The afternoon between 4 and 6 is very good. Avoid lunch times. So again, depending on your industry and depending on the sector that you're in, discuss as a team and decide when is the best time to do your power hours. And when you're doing those calls, then good practice is to say for that time, if it's 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon, or 2 hours in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon, that's time when we don't respond to email, we don't have meetings, we don't have product presentations. We are just focusing on the telephone and getting through the numbers. So I think it's about that cadence, and it's about creating that structure where you can say this is now pure telephoning time. Another important aspect is to be prepared in the event that the prospect does not pick up the phone. As we said earlier, the number of times that people pick up the phone is less than 10%. I've read a statistic of 6% or 3%. It will depend on your industry and who you're trying to call, the level that you're trying to call. But be prepared for the fact that 90% of the time, the phone is going to ring and you're not going to get through. And it's not because they're not interested. It's because they're busy. As I said earlier, people don't sit around waiting for the phone to ring. They're busy, and it's hard to interrupt them. So what do we do with the other 90%? Think about a tactics and strategy for that other 90%. We would suggest call as high as you can. So think about your different buying roles and say we're going to call for the most logical person at the highest level. It might be the CEO, might not always be the CEO. Maybe it's a CMO or a CIO or a C-level person. That's where I'm going to call. I'm going to start there and then think that there are probably 5 things that could happen in that 90%. So, or actually on the call itself, you could get through in 10% of the time. You could leave a voicemail. You could speak to their executive assistant or their admin or PA. You could leave a voicemail for that person, or you could go back to a receptionist. So there are most likely 5 things that can happen, and you need to have a strategy for those 5 scenarios. For voicemail, which is a very common sales tool, I think now, you need to have a well-prepared credibility introduction, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. If you're talking to a gatekeeper, always, and I'll talk also more specifically about gatekeepers, but the trick is to always try and get a referral to another buying influence. And then you want to repeat this process for all key power people. So if you think about an organization, and here's an example, what we really want to be doing is creating a footprint in that organization. So you would call as high as you can, say in this example, the CEO, you'd leave a voicemail because they're not there. You would then have a dialogue with their admin. You would send an email to the admin to follow up. You would do the same when you end the call with the admin. You're going to say, we always speak to the COO or the CIO. Again, get put through to them, leave a voicemail with them, speak to their admin or their PA, leave a voicemail with them, send them an email. And basically, you're using these different touch points of voicemail, email, admin email, and voicemail to develop a kind of social DNA. And what happens generally is all of these interactions happen. So rather than just focusing on one person, and then what happens in the organization is they all refer it to one person. So, for example, the orange bubbles on this slide are what we do. The little blue bubbles are what the client does. So they would be saying, oh, this is not my job. This belongs to the VP of operations. So what happens is the VP of operations gets 2 or 3 emails from different people saying, hey, Bill, this is for you. Can you handle this? And I think this is a much better approach than really focusing on one person and just phoning and phoning and phoning, which I see very often. So try and create this multi-touch approach to prospecting. You're very often going to come across gatekeepers, very typical. And again, this is basic, so you probably understand this, but just to remind you and give you a few tips on that, we're saying make friends with them, be polite, use the word please. Please is a wonderful word. I think that's sometimes forgotten. Be transparent and listen. We also often don't listen carefully. Salespeople generally not very good at listening, but really listen to their responses. Thank them for their help. And basically enlist their support. Get their advice for a good time to call a prospect. And make a note of their details, their phone number, their email, put it in your CRM so that you can start to build, as I say, this multi-touch approach where you're basically making them part of that process. So gatekeepers are reality. They're always going to be there. You need to be skilled and tactful in how you work with them. Leaving voicemails, and we've done quite a lot of webinars and previous work with value selling in webinars and in programs about how to construct a really good credibility introduction, what we call a credibility introduction, where you're leveraging essentially what your company does and the problems it solves. And you want to build that into your voicemail. So good voicemail, 60 seconds maximum, identify your company, state your phone number at the beginning and your name, and then state the reason for your call and what is a typical business issue that you deal with and the problems that you solve. If you can get in a value metric in there, that's very useful. And then create curiosity. Curiosity, I think, is a wonderful thing for salespeople to try and achieve. Give them a reason to call back. And finally, repeat your name and number again at the end, because as we all know, people are not going to rewind the voicemail to hear your number. So it's really helpful if you repeat it at the end of the call in a natural way. So if you don't have a good voicemail, I would refer to some of our previous webinars where we spent the whole 45 minutes thinking about credibility introductions and really focus in on that and make it natural and real. A couple of points on handling objections and handling brush-offs, very, very common. Simple approach, I would say, is the little acronym of ACCA: agree, clarify, ask. The one, I'm sure we've all heard these. The favorite one is probably I'm busy at the moment. If I'm using that ACA acronym, I would say something like, oh, that's very good. I thought you would be. Most of my clients are. So you're agreeing with them, asking them, clarifying when would be a good time, and then a call to action. Would you have 15 minutes, say, next Wednesday? I think you're better off, certainly in telephone prospecting, to try and sell the time to have the sales conversation rather than doing the sales conversation. And I know there are two schools of thought on that, but I think generally if you're prospecting, people are busy, and unless there is opportunity to jump straight into your discovery questions and finding out their business issue and talking to them, I would say you're always better to be saying to them, can I have 20 minutes of your time next Wednesday or whenever it is to actually talk to you about this. Another objection might be we're happy with our current provider. Again, agree with them. Great, excellent. If you're happy, I don't think you should think about changing. So you agree, and that kind of disarms people. If you say, yeah, no, I understand that, and then you want to go straight on and say, well, I'm only calling because we work with, and then into your value statement or your credibility introduction, I'm only calling because you work with certain roles, and obviously that's the same role that they are in the similar industry, i.e. their industry. We've helped them solve their biggest problems that you solve, and we've turned around, blah, 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 a relevant metric. And it'd be great to have 15, 20 minutes with you to see if we could do something similar. Would you be available next Friday at 2 o'clock? So disarm them by agreeing, clarify it, and then have a call to action where you're bringing them to the next stage. Just send me the information. Also very common. Agree, I'll be happy, no problem. We have so many products and solutions, you might say, so now I'm clarifying. Could you tell me specifically what you're looking for? And it is now a bad time. Maybe I can call you tomorrow about 10 o'clock. Interesting question around is now a bad time or is now a good time. The research is better to say is now a bad time rather than is now a good time. If you say is now a good time, the chances are they're going to say no. Whereas if you say is now a bad time, you have more chance of them saying, well, yeah, okay, we've got a few minutes now. Final one, just to give an example of, and again, this is very common. I'm not interested. Again, agree. A lot of my clients said that initially, and I'm not sure if we're a great fit. However, we work with a number of, and then again, you're going into the roles that you work with, the industries, the problems that you solve, and the business value metric that you've achieved with a nice reference. And then going on to say, it'd be great to see if I could help you in the same way, and can we have a conversation when it is convenient. So this is not this has to be natural. It's something that you need to practice. It's something that you need to expect to happen, but you need to practice it and you need to become skillful at handling these brush-offs and objections. They are normal, and I think it's part of selling. Some interesting statistics. 44% of salespeopeople give up after the first attempt, and I've heard actually higher percentages than that, but that's one that we've picked up. 93% of converted leads, on the other hand, are contacted on the 6th call attempt. So it could take 5 or 6 to actually qualify a lead, get through to someone. Most people give up after 1 or 2 attempts. 35 to 50% of sales go to the vendor that responds first. And I think that's an interesting one because we live in this information age, and I think we've actually become a bit spoiled by the internet, where if you want something, you get an immediate response. I think that behavior has gone over into the business-to-business world. So when people want something, they want it really quickly, and we need to be very aware of that. Top salespeople use LinkedIn at least 6 hours per week, so that goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's a fantastic tool. And then the final one, which relates to the referrals that I was talking about earlier, 91% of customers say they would give referrals if asked, but only 11% of salespeople ask for referrals from Dale Carnegie. So, I think that's an interesting one because we're saying referrals are by far the best form of lead generation, and actually just over 10% of people ask for them. But most clients would give it if they were asked. So I think that's a useful one to think about. A couple of ideas moving to close. Ideas for future action. Some things to think about. I'd like to have 5 minutes at the end for questions, but just to give you a few ideas going forward. Just to summarize what I've been talking about. Profile the organizations that are likely to do business with you and their current challenges. So be laser focused on exactly who it is that we're targeting. Secondly, list the key sources of information about these organizations in your industry or marketplace. So where am I going to find this information? Ask at least 3 clients for a referral as an action plan. So think about who are 3 people that I've done business with, who are happy clients. I'm going to pick up the phone to them tomorrow, and I'm going to say, I'm just interested, who else you could think of in your network who would have the same kind of issues and problems that you have or that I could help with. Fourthly, think about that multi-touch approach and brainstorm as a team, perhaps, who are the highest level decision makers that we should be contacting, and then what are the 3 other important buying roles. So if we're saying that there are on average 5 or 6 people, probably more in some complex B2B sales, what are those job roles? And then how do we build a really natural way of talking to gatekeepers and talking to executive assistants that says, I understand this person's busy, but we always talk to the financial director, or we always talk to the CMO or the CIO, and having that cadence where every time, instead of just saying, oh, they're not there and putting the phone down, that you're looking for another buying role and then repeating the process to build the social DNA and create a footprint in the client. And then finally, the activity piece sounds obvious, but that's where it starts. It actually starts on how many calls do I have to make today? How many dials do I have to do in the next hour? How many people are going to pick up the phone? And just focusing on that, and as the famous Nike ad, just doing it, just getting it done. So schedule time. It's about creating those power hours. Discuss that in your team. Be purposeful. This is not a hit and miss kind of situation. There's a nice book, for those of you like reading, it's a good time management book by Brian Tracy called Eat That Frog. Your frog is the most important, the biggest task, the one that you're most likely to procrastinate on if you don't do something about it. For many salespeople, picking up the phone is the frog. So my suggestion to you is eat the frog. Think about the thing that's going to impact on your end result most is probably about the activity. It's probably about the amount that you're actually dialing and trying to contact your ideal clients. Don't hide behind your email schedules, and just target in a focused way to get this job done, because this is the basics. So I've covered some strategy, some tactics, some angles to take on prospecting. We have some time for some questions. Let me have a look in the question box here. The question from, can you repeat the best time of day? So Wednesdays and Thursdays was the best time. And I'm quoting here, and I mean, there are many organizations who do this research, but some of you might know InsideSales.com, very focused on research and predictive analytics and knowing exactly what the best time of day to call is. So they would be saying that Wednesdays and Thursdays are the critical days, and the time to avoid is lunchtime, and you want to pick up, I'm just looking at my notes here, between 9 and 11, I think, in the morning, or between 4 and 6 in the afternoon. But I can come back to you specifically on that. Question from Josh, what are the best practice frequency for leaving voicemails? In terms of frequency, my suggestion would be 5 calls is the optimum number. After 5 calls and you're getting no response, I think it's time to consider whether you do actually have a vision match or whether there's a prospect there at all. I think after 5, it starts to sound like stalking and hounding people. Somewhere around 3 or 4 is ideal. But I would say after 5, there's a kind of diminishing return of the number of times that you should be chasing people. And actually, you're much better off to try and find other power players in an organization rather than continuing to bombard one person. So I would definitely not go more than 5 times. Question around an example of creating curiosity in a voicemail. I think this is very much around what we would call in value selling the value story. So it would be about creating a small template, and I'm happy to send that to you, where we're saying this type of buying role, so the person you're talking to with these kind of problems, we created this kind of business value metric return after they'd used our solution. So impactful, a very impactful business result, specifically for that individual buying role in their specific industry. And the curiosity is created by saying, well, we would love to have a conversation to see if we could do the same for you. But your reference story has to be impactful, and of course you need permission to do that. So thank you very much for those questions. As I said earlier, I am very happy to handle more questions. My email is at the end of this webinar, so drop me a line and I'll happily come back to you with that. Just a few points in closing. As I said earlier, the webinar will be recorded, and it is on the website in a couple of hours. In the website itself, you will find a lot of resources. Our newsletters are there. We have webinars every month. All of the recorded webinars are also on the website. We have also on the website our e-store, so the books are there. The Value Selling Essentials program, many different white papers and tools. So have a browse through that. Just to let you know that our next webinar will be on the 16th of March at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and you're very welcome to join us then. We're going to be talking about the concept of becoming a trusted partner or trusted advisor, and how do you do that effectively. So I'd urge you to join us for the next session. Please follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and it's all in our Facebook page. So that will be great. And as I say, finally, more than welcome to contact me. With my phone number and email are there, and I'm happy to come back to you with any questions and comments. So we are at the top of the hour almost, and I'd like to thank you very much for your listening and participation with the questions. It's been a great session. I've enjoyed it, and let's keep in touch, and we will talk to you next time. Thanks very much.